Good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining the Pendoring 2022 student webinar. I'm sure there's some more people who are constantly joining us, but I think we should kick off so we respect everybody's time. I'm Eben Kian. I'm the General Manager of the Pendoring Awards, which is an annual award program that celebrates the best of South Africa's creativity in all of our Indigenous languages. Quite simply, we #Speak South African. Joining me are three people who are as passionate about Indigenous languages as we are. Carl Willoughby is the Executive Creative Director at TBWA Hunt Lascaris. Carl and his team were responsible for the exceptional Nissan Shui campaign that won the prestigious Umpeta Award at the Pendorings last year. That's the highest prize you can win at the Pendorings. We've had the privilege of having Carl and his talented team work on the Pendoring campaign this year. And joining him are Lillian van der Merwe and Juliet Honey, who will walk you through the campaign and the process behind it of creating a campaign for Pendoring. At the end, there will be a Q&A session, so please jot your thoughts down and feel free to ask any questions you have at the end of the session. So over to you, Carl. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Evan. I think I'm going to share from my side. Morning, everyone. We don't have Juliet, unfortunately. But we've got Lillian on the side of here, so she'll take us through that work for Pendoring this year. So hopefully you can see my screen. I won't be able to see anyone, but I'll go quite swiftly through this. I'll speak a little bit about Shui, but I'll just give you some context leading up to that. So Stanbanan, everyone. I'm from TBWA.
We've lost your audio, Carl.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can.
All good. Okay, fantastic. Cool, thanks. So hopefully that should work.
Yes, perfect.
Cool. So I just thought I'd include this quote. It's better to be a pirate than join the Navy. It's a quote from Steve Jobs. And just the reason why I'm telling you about this is you'll see a few pirate things here and there. And this just speaks to the idea of not conforming to anything. What is quite important for us, and I think this just helps us progress from a creative point of view, is the idea of being locally relevant yet globally competitive. I think just kind of doing work that just resonates locally is good, is great, is fantastic. That's technically what we're all needing to do, but we still need to push the envelope forward. So the work that we'll speak a little bit about is work that we feel can resonate with the local audience, but also feels like it can compete with some of the best work from a global point of view. I'll take you through some old South African work, just to give you a little bit of context. TBWA years ago, well, decades ago, obviously, I don't know if anyone here is familiar with it, but the BMW mouse ad, which I think won gold at Cannes and did really well, I guess, firstly for TBWA, but also for the South African advertising industry, where really the world kind of noticed us and stood up and went, oh, okay, cool, South Africa is quite a force. But I'll play you the ad and I'll just give you the context, the reason behind playing that.
BMW 318i. Now, with power steering.
So, really a great ad from a South African point of view, put us on the map in terms of being globally competitive creatively. But you could argue that piece wasn't invited through. If you look at it from today's kind of space, is not really. We couldn't really say that is a South African ad. There's nothing there that tells you, okay, cool, that is South Africa. That is that is from this place down south, on the African continent. It's just something to keep in mind, and I'll come back to that. It's also a time when, we, sort of in the 90s, even prior to that, when people generated ads, the Unilevers of the world, they would, from a relevance point of view, they would do an ad that would speak to a specific audience, and at the time it was all kind of skewed one way. The ad on the left will show you that. I'll just play that.
Coffee and Cremora. Yep, Cremora. Where'd she put it? Knows how I like my Cremora. Now she hides it.
Cremora, the non-dairy creamer. It tastes so rich and creamy, you'll expect to find it in the refrigerator.
And there's no Cremora in the refrigerator! It's not inside, it's on top! It's not inside, it's on top!
Cremora, the top of the coffee creamer.
So interesting. In terms of relevance, ad developed for a certain audience. But then as South Africa transitioned, relevance in terms of local work, this was I think, the attempt at kind of trying to be relevant to a specific audience. Just have a look.
Coffee and Cremora. Who's Cremora? Where did she put it? She knows I like my Cremora. Now she hides it.
Cremora. Tastes so rich and creamy. You'd expect to find it in the fridge.
Tammy, there's no Cremora in the fridge.
It's not inside, it's on top.
It's not inside, it's on top.
Cremora, top of the coffee creamers.
So that was a way that marketers used to kind of try and be relevant to a specific audience, was, I guess, superficially develop an ad and then shoot it in a way that it kind of speaks to various audiences. So you'd literally produce more than one ad. You'd have like a Lux ad, a certain demographic portrayed in the communication, and then you'd have the same ad with a different demographic. And that was an attempt, I guess, the early days of personalization, but that was an attempt to be relevant. And this is, I just wanted to speak about that because, as a country, we've come a long way since that way of marketing. A quote that I always use, or from a relevancy point of view, is a Nelson Mandela quote, which is still resonates for me in terms of trying to be relevant, and we'll make a point later on, not just about language, but cultural relevance, being insightful. So the quote is, if you talk to a man in a language he understands, that goes to his head. If you talk to him in his own language, that goes to his heart. And that just means that if you do work that really shows that you understand someone, then it resonates with that audience in a much more meaningful, much deeper manner. Just leading up to Shwi, there was a campaign that was quite important, and also won the Umpeta from a Zulu point of view. It was for City Lodge, and what was interesting with that was that we developed the work. It was done in English, super insightful, but an insight that kind of straddled different audiences, not just, if you think of the Cremora space, not just in terms of one audience, but it's an insight that I guess all South Africans could relate to. And really what it did was opened up for us and the team the opportunity to develop work like Shwi, because Shwi literally came off the back of that. I'll play you the first spot, which is in English, and then I'll play you another spot. And there was a bigger, fuller campaign, but it's in Zulu. All the subtitles are there for anyone who might not understand, but you'll understand the insight as a South African.
So, you're heading home to Cape Town for the holidays. You get to see Maggie.
And it's free.
Yes, Maggie. Your deaf, cataracty Maltese poodle with renal failure and her own miniature dialysis machine.
You get to stay for free.
You get to stay in her old room.
For free.
The room that seems to bear the brunt of Maggie's incurable irritable bowel syndrome.
It's free.
Well, there's always the guest room, now known as the Pleasure Cave, after your parents' tantric sex workshop with a caftan-clad hippie named Jill.
You must get for free.
What about your uncle? Your Uncle Gavin, who insists you call him Unky Gabby, like you used to when you were 4.
Deal with Gabby because it's for free.
Just stay at Town Lodge, a room with a door that locks from only $6.80 per night. It's better than free, actually.
Let's go,
And what was interesting about that was, like, you could argue like the BMW mouse ad that doesn't really feel South African, except for maybe some of the insights, but not really. It doesn't have that depth or proper insight from a South African point of view. But when we translated this, but when we took this into a more local space, that's I think where the campaign came alive. I think even if you don't speak Zulu, you can appreciate certain aspects about this, about some of the insights that are spoken about, just as a South African. So this is the Zulu the piece.
Ukhethile makudo sekule ukuvakashela emzini KZN njalo ngamaholide ngempoqo. Uzochupha ekamelweni la ngaphandle. Lele neshawe livalwe ngekhethi. Amanzi amahala. Uzathi sageza endlini bashaya itoilet ushiswa amanzi eshawa. Aphume toilet ngakho emahala. Umthetho wala ekhaya uthi uzoqoka iphini vale nguvela amabaleni. Shubaba amabala amahala. Uselele impungulo. Ngapha shiwe ingwe. Uyisu engenwa mahala. Umagodungo wethu uzosiwashela siphele. Asiyanela sikorobhele. Ufana nesikipa samahala. Umagodungo sibonakala ngedulela. Namadola amnyama sice. Kumnandi ukulala kamadololo. Yini ehlwinde emahala. Indawo yokuhlala neshawe ngeke lishise uqala ku-680 ngobusuku eTown Lodge.
Cool. So you can see how the campaign really came alive in the Zulu space, and there are a number of executions that we've done. What is interesting about that was, back to that point of being locally relevant, globally competitive, is obviously from a Zulu point of view, locally relevant, but also globally competitive. I think the campaign had won at every major international award show, as well as the Umpeta award locally. So for us, that was good. And what was great about it was that it opened up this opportunity of more Zulu work, of more locally relevant work. And I think, there's a point that I'll come back to, that it's not just a language thing, it's an insight thing. Off the success of the Zulu radio, the same team actually worked on Nissan Shwi. And I think what we were enjoying was the ability to do stuff in I guess, vernacular in Zulu that was insightful. And I think what's interesting about Shwi in a tech space was that it's, as the world kind of develops from a technological point of view, I think many of us are familiar with the likes of Alexa, Siri, but these voice assistant technological apps don't actually speak in any of the local vernacular languages, and not just, I guess, not just from a South African point of view. I think from a global point of view, there are certain languages that it really doesn't use, just based off the amount of users that use it. I'll play you the case study, which will give you an overarching kind of idea of the Nissan Shwi campaign. And then I'll play you two radio spots that help just amplify the campaign and the need to download the voice preference.
Everybody loves Waze, the navigation app that translates data from your mobile device into real-time reports so you can avoid traffic, potholes, and the police. You can use Waze in 98 languages, including Arabic, Mandarin, and even a boy band.
Have a pleasant drive.
But we still can't use it in our most widely spoken language, isiZulu. Waze uses English, which is only number 6, and Afrikaans, only number 3. So we created Binison, the first voice assistant that warns you like only a Zulu can. When a Zulu gives you a warning,
We call it war.
you listen. The language uses phonetic sounds so you can hear the danger inside every word. Sounds like a break-in. Sounds like a car rolling. Sounds like bad weather. We hacked the personal voice recorder feature on Waze to upload 41 key Zulu commands to help our users avoid danger without the need for translation.
Jika kwesokudla. Jika kwesokunxele. Asole khona. Uzofahla.
This allowed us to create a shareable link accessed via the Waze app, as well as content for a nationwide integrated campaign. The cost to upload a new voice on Waze is $75,000. We did it for less than 5. Nissan is rolling out the next set of languages, isiXhosa, Sesotho, and Setswana, to help give more indigenous languages a voice. It is delicious. Any app can give out directions. Only one navigates danger in a language you truly understand.
Cool. So just from a Nissan point of view, technology is quite important. Waze didn't have this language preference, Zulu. So I think you can navigate in like so many different languages, but not in any of the local languages. Afrikaans is there, funnily enough. Obviously English, you get American English, UK, British English. But Zulu or any of the other local indigenous languages aren't available. I'll play you one of the radio spots just to give you a sense of how we kind of use radio using Zulu to amplify the campaign.
Akaboni imoto yokinga kena phezu kwakho sina kuba uhamba ngeNissan enoshwi amehlo kubona ingozi sakho. This is kuthi amaconce kuthiwa amathempukane uhamba unyuka amakhulu wehlele emigodini namaxhoxhozi emalahleni uthi usaqukana nemfucumfucu yokuqhiqhiza khama ukunqola yamalahli yequmqwaqo sina kuba uhamba ngeNissan enoshwi amehlo kubona ingozi saqhamuka.
Cool. So just coming back to the idea of locally relevant, globally competitive, I think there is something around the world where we're starting to see that, yes, if you look at BMW as an example, it didn't feel like it was necessarily South African, but we're seeing from a global point of view that people are celebrating local cultural insights. Whereas in the past, if you consider like a fast car ad would always just be, it's a fast car, that is it. There's no kind of cultural context to any of that stuff. But I think what's happening from a global point of view is that people are starting to celebrate those local cultural insights. That's new news. I think the world is embracing that. Whereas in the past, the world celebrated work that spoke to a specific audience, and often those audience groups were really just judges at an international award show. So fortunately, all of that's changing. I'm going to show you 2 pieces before I hand over to Lillian. And I think just to the point of work that is locally relevant, this is for, both of these are for the South American market for different brands. But you could argue that in some way, these these pieces could actually work in South Africa as well. I think South America in many ways are very similar to us in terms of being, I guess, in some parts and pockets largely third world, but in other ways also first world. But they've got a lot of cultural nuances that they lean into in terms of the kind of work that they showcase or enter. So let me play you the first one. It's Corona native sportscasters.
Muchos creen que en México solo se habla el español. Lo que no conocen es que se hablan 68 lenguas indígenas.
Coron, carne exata de terate un amigo.
New selección si Nicoyo si Yankee.
Son los ganadores que van a narrar el partido de las selecciones deportivas de diferentes lenguas indígenas.
Ganadores que van a narrar el partido en lenguas nativas.
It's a great piece. I think just language-wise, there's a lot of things that we have in common. The next piece is called Data Tienda, and I think uses an insight that could literally work in South Africa as well. And I think just the point that I want to make about this case study is that, or I guess both of these, is that, you know, if you go back to that Cremore example about work developed for a certain audience and then translated to another audience, often the superficial translation of just language and demographic in terms of the person that you're showcasing isn't necessarily enough. I think using language is key and important, and we're seeing that in South Africa as we kind of use language in true Zulu or true Xhosa or Afrikaans, or we mix that up. But I think work that taps into insights in terms of cultural insights goes beyond just the language, beyond just the skin tone, skin color thing, but actually uses things that people can relate to as a notion. I think that's where work becomes really powerful. So this is the last piece I'll share before I hand over.
Millions of low-income women in Mexico cannot study or start a business because they don't have access to credit. 83% of them don't have a bank payment history that allows for verification of their payment behavior, thus having their loan applications rejected.
Solicitar un crédito, nadie me lo ha querido dar porque no cuento con historial crediticio.
Paradoxically, they are women who have received loans from neighborhood stores all their lives, so they have a long credit history. Just that these credit records don't appear in the financial information centers, but the accounting records of thousands of shopkeepers throughout the country. That is why We Capital, in search of the financial inclusion of women in Mexico, launched Data Tienda, a financial information center within the reach of banks, which recovers the credit history of millions of Mexican women from the neighborhood businesses' accounting records. To collect data, women should only enter the information of at least 5 trusted stores on datatienda.mx. So the system, through WhatsApp bots, automatically collects qualitative and quantitative information from shopkeepers, and it creates a credit score, which analyzes even more variables than the traditional information system.
Es una central de información financiera como cualquier otra, solo que con mujeres no bancarizadas. En Datatienda podemos consultar su comportamiento de pago y darles crédito con un margen menor de riesgo.
Today, 23% of the women on the platform have received microcredits for their businesses, and in just a few months, over 10,300 credit histories have been generated with information from nearly 50,000 shopkeepers throughout the country.
Miles de mujeres han recibido microcréditos para sus emprendimientos gracias a Datatienda.
Inclusión financiera para las mujeres en México.
Historias de crédito que cambian historias de vida.
No, a mí ya había 2 veces que me negaban el préstamo y hasta ahora me lo dieron.
Con el crédito que me hicieron, yo me compré esta máquina.
We are recovering credit histories to change life stories. Datatienda.
So you can see from a cultural insight point of view, it's something that could have worked in South Africa as well in the informal space. And I think we celebrate local indigenous languages, but there's more that we can tap into, not just from a language point of view, more in terms of cultural insights that utilize language, that utilize various things to be able to make work really locally resonate with our audience. I'm going to hand over to Lillian, who'll take us through, so obviously we did the Pendoring campaign this year for 2022, and she'll take us through the thinking and some of the work from this campaign.
Great, thank you, Carl. Thanks to everyone for your time. We're very excited to share this with you, and hopefully you'll see some of these pieces in and around your studios or your colleges really soon. So this was a wonderful brief for me personally, since the reason why I'm in advertising is Pendoring. I once met a woman who bought a new couch with her prize money from Pendoring, and I was like, that's the life I want to live. So here we are. I haven't bought a couch, but 10 years in, we get opportunities to do really cool campaigns. So we were briefed to create awareness for Pendoring, the platform that embraces country and industry to promote, unify, and celebrate the richness of South Africa's creative content in all its indigenous languages. So we created a campaign idea to bring this to life in a look and feel and key visual for Pendoring 2022. So what's really important, also what Carl said, it's not about language anymore. It's really about the cultural understanding where you come from, what you experience, what the people around you experience, and using language in our form of art and communication to bring that to life. So then we did some research, and we found that only 1 in 10 South Africans speak English as a first language at home. And that's why at the end of the day, you'll hear a lot of people say, sorry, everyone, my English has run out. This normally happens for me around 3 o'clock on a normal weekday and 11 o'clock on a Friday. So what does this mean? This became our idea because we've heard it around our studio and around our groups of friends numerous times, and that told us there must be something in this if it's true for everyone. So we want to celebrate that moment when the English runs out and your true self comes through your first language and your mother tongue. So this is when you can let your language loose and you can open your mouth and be your true self. So we've also realized that most South Africans start their day by packing away their first language in a metaphorical suitcase just before you leave home for work. So this language, whether it's Afrikaans, Xhosa, Sotho, Pedi, has no choice. This language didn't ask to be shut up and hidden away. This language has no choice. But what happens when we stow away our Zulu, Xhosa, Sotho, Afrikaans, Swati, Tsonga, Ndebele, Tswana, Venda, Pedi, and sign language for the day? there's something happening in that suitcase while we're chatting away in English in our second language. So, like an angry mother waiting in the dim light after midnight, it's heaving and breathing, it's stretching and screaming, it's puffing and panting, ready to get out and give you a good talking to. And if you know what's good for you, you will let your language loose. And that is really our call to action and our call to entry for Pendorings this year. If you speak any language other than English as your first language, we want you to let it loose. And that goes for every single language. So we have a great, wonderful, talented studio of people who speak many different languages. So once we came up with this idea to let your language loose, which goes for every single language, I think, Cole, you can go through the next slides. It just animates to show who we're talking to and what we need from them. So we briefed our studio, copywriters, designers, art directors, to think about what this means for them, because it comes alive in so many different ways. So after we've cracked this idea, we did the work. We briefed everyone, and we got some really cool ideas and experiences and pieces of work back. So the first and the most important statement we want to make is the fact that your language wants everyone to know that its name is not Vernac. It's 2022. We're not just translating ideas into Vernac anymore. We are originating ideas in our lived experiences and in the languages that we speak. So it really is time for everyone to get on board to be able to identify the specific languages that we do the work in. So this is what it means for a certain person to let your language loose, and to make a provocative statement. The next one is what it feels like when you let your language loose. And the interesting thing is a lot of men mentioned the feeling of taking your bra off after a long day, which was very interesting. So your language wants to take its bra off and bathe in the breeze. That's what it means to let your language loose. Another version is that your language wants to go straight home, no stopping at the Queenstown Shell every day, not just for the Amma festive. That's another feeling you get when you put the English away and you start speaking your mother tongue. This one, I'm not going to read the whole Zulu, but it basically translates to the audacity, the nature of your language to want to drive through the suburbs playing amapiano really loudly with the sunroof open. Cool. Normally on the Afrikaans Sunday newspaper, on the front page, you'll see most of the most scandalous and salacious stories. So jou taal sal enigiets doen om die Sondagkoerant se voorblad storie te wees. Means that your language really wants to push the boundaries and sometimes upset some people or do something illegal. This one is really sweet and vulnerable. Your language wants to ask the person out that they really wanted to ask out for a long time. This one I think is true in any language, in any culture. So your language wants to get out the house so badly, it will even call its dad by his first name. And then another one that says your language wants to get a tattoo that says no regrets. Because that's the ultimate way of YOLOing, right? So this is how it will come to life in print and in posters. I think we've got a couple of press ads. It will go into digital. So it's just visually also such a audacious and colorful and lively expression of what can happen when we do work in our own languages. Cool. This is how it translates to audio. So originally these were traditional radio ads, but it's really easy to make them transform into visual pieces that can live on Spotify, YouTube, social media, wherever. So we've got 3 versions that we'll play for you. And the first one is called Quinoa. Thanks.
Another day of 9 to 5 English in this dull cubicle. Joining calls and taking a lunch break shorter than my attention span. So many to answer questions about why it's Gqeberha and not PE. Having non-stop discussions about quagmires and why quinoa is not popular in Kwakwa. Oh, everything feels like a quiz. What am I, a Harlequin? I need a coffee. Ukakamba took the day off. Now Gondil is making my macchiato. I tell her my tongue needs something nice because it spent all day pretending to be someone else. And you know, sometimes your Xhosa just wants to Xhosa. Let your language loose and enter your work by 23 September 2022 at pendoring.co.za.
Cool. So please diarize that date and get vickling on your entries for Pendoring. This next one is based on a true story. I don't know how many of you were alive in 2006. This is based on the very notorious South African serial killer who managed to escape from Pretoria's highest security prison a couple of times. So he covered his whole body in Vaseline, slipped through the bars, and left a little note to the prison wardens to say, "If you," which was the inspiration for this piece.
Your language wants to lather its loins in loads of petroleum jelly so that it can slither, slip, and slide through the prison bars of the second language you speak when you temporarily visit corporate South Africa. It wants to burst out and break free from the confines of "How are you? I'm fine." It wants the fictional guards of this fictitious prison to know that it served its time, even though there was no crime. It wants to leave a little note that says, "Yo ma's language is finally loose." Let your language loose and enter your work by 23 September 2022 at pendoring.co.za.
Great. The next one is an Afrikaans version. So even if the guys in the room want to put up their hands to show some support and some understanding for that absolute feeling of bliss after the end of the day, where you can let yourself loose, have a little scratch, and breathe.
Oor die juk, oor die druk van hierdie beklemmende kledingstuk. Die beste lyfie byt soos 'n rooi kat wyfie. Dis die reël. Die ou queen se siel wat sê waar jy jou moedertaal moet beteel. Soos die gespe wat knel, so wrimmel jou taal vlak onder die vel. Van die werk tot by die winkel speak you the English, soms met 'n kinkel. Die rek en die strek wat jou siel opwek, wanneer die blerrie praat daar ver oor die rusbank trek. Salig is daai titikrap. Salig is die siel. Let jou Afrikaans los en skryf in vir Pendoring teen 23 September 2022 by pendoring.co.za.
Thanks, Carl.
Thank you so much, TB. Oh, sorry, you've still got another bit of your slide. Please go ahead.
Just two more minutes. I think what we just want to illustrate is how this really can come to life across platforms. And our TikTok, and I hope there are some TikTok creators on the line that can take this challenge of letting your language loose and showing us what happens when you do that. I think it's such a great and fertile ground where people are already creating content in their own languages based in cultural insights that becomes entertainment and viral pieces of work that can also be entered into Pendoring, right? So we don't have to show you the examples. These were just for us to show people expressing themselves, but we see that on TikTok whenever we open the app. So I think on the next slide, Carl, the most important thing for us to leave you with today is reasons why to enter Pendoring 2022. As an industry, it's really important for us to keep creating work in our mother tongues. So apart from the cash prizes and proving to your parents that you have a real job, as Carl said, every campaign in a language other than English is a reason and a motivation for us to do more. and to create more. So opportunities arise from it. And as we've seen the Southern American work, these are insights that can be very true for us. So there's an international stage for our work as well. We are way past just translating ideas into different languages. It really is about bringing your lived experiences, bringing your understanding of culture to life in a language that speaks to other people's hearts. So I think you've also had a lot of conversations about what it means for representation, what it means for transformation. So I won't go into that, but it really is the cornerstone of that in our industry. But really, it is the most fun that you can have with your clothes on. Cool. Thank you so much. Thanks for your time. You can ask us anything if you have any questions. We can't say questions in the normal English way anymore. So any questions are welcome.
Thank you so much, TBWA Hunt Lascaris. That was super inspiring as always. This organization, TBWA Hunt Lascaris, was also one of the reasons I entered the world of advertising and branding. So we're super excited to have them having work on the Pendoring campaign this year. Now, I'm sure you're all itching to go out and create some exceptional work. We hope you enter it into Pendoring. So our overall student winner receives 10,000 Rand in cash. And what we're doing behind the scenes is working really hard to ensure that the industry wants your Indigenous language skills. So that you guys can also one day work in an exceptional studio like Hunt Lascaris and many others out there in South Africa. Entries are submitted online using our very simple system. The link is in the chat. Our info and help menus have a host of guidelines, tips, and tricks if you do get stuck. This menu on the right of the entry system also allows you to create and manage your accounts and entries. For the lecturers, if you already entered last year, you can simply sign into that same details. The category page tells you exactly what the judges will be looking for from your entry, and you can enter the work directly from the categories. We look forward to seeing your entries this year. Email us at hello@Pendoring if you have any queries. I'll also quickly put that email address in the chat. But we'd like to open the floor now to questions or comments for the next 10 minutes. If you have questions, please raise your hand or type it in the chat and we'll try to get to you one at a time. If there's any other questions after today, you can also put it to us afterwards on the email address. Any questions in the chat?
There is a question from William Knight. He wants to know, what if we are English speaking? Would it be pointless to enter?
No, it's never pointless to enter. We live in a very diverse country, so my best deal to you is get a friend to help you let their language loose, and you can be helpful in the process. Just as an example, when Hunt Lascaris worked on this campaign, there were several English people involved in the campaign process. So diverse thinking brings out the best creativity, and you're surrounded by people talking all sorts of languages every day. So we've seen past winners of Pendoring being English first language speakers, but work in a team and make sure that you've got language skills that's as diverse as our country.
Yeah, if I could add to that, Eben, nothing is ever pointless, and I think we need to take an interest in the people around us who speak different languages. It really is about collaboration and asking questions and trying to understand the lives around us. So please don't ever tell people or the people in your team that you don't get it, because there's a reason why they come up with certain ideas and why there's reasons for it. Rather ask them to bring you into the fold so that you can understand it better, because just because you don't get it doesn't mean that other people won't, right? So really open yourself up to the people in your class and in your studio.
Yeah, I think there's if I may, I think in the past it always felt like we're the small people, insignificant South Africa, small-time players, but we're not. I think globally what's happening is that there's a celebration of local culture. There's a celebration of things that in the past were kind of hidden or that people thought were not important. But now those things are important. And I think if you lean into that, even at a student level, if you lean into that, that's something that can help drive your success as an individual within the creative industry. So the world celebrates it. Locally, we celebrate that. Pendoring celebrates that. So lean into that for your own personal success.
And then Christian would like to know if we want to change our brand from what we originally chose to one that lines up with our message better, is that all right?
Absolutely.
Okay.
I can answer that one. Absolutely. Regardless of what you're busy with at college at the moment, if there's a piece of creative work that you worked in, even if it's not part of your specific college briefs at that moment, you can enter it either through your university or college or on your own, as long as you're registered with a private institution. We've had instances in the past where students didn't agree with their lecturers about the quality of their work, and they went on their own and they entered it. And in one such instance, somebody actually became the overall student winner at Pendoring. So for any brand, you guys do have the freedom, unlike the industry. When you're working in the industry, it must be real work that was flighted on real TV stations or on social media, etc. In your instance, as students, you're allowed to be experimental and show us the best work that you think proves your ability to communicate in Indigenous languages.
Aisha would like to know, what about using phrases from other languages on a religious and cultural level? For example, for me, it's phrases in Arabic.
So Aisha, absolutely. What Pendoring is there. So for 70% of the work must be in one of the Indigenous languages in South Africa. But for instance, if you combine COPs with Arabic phrases, by all means, all your work is entered with English translations, because not all of our adjudicators can speak all Indigenous languages. Otherwise, we'd have to have crazy ventriloquists and multilingualists judging the work. So 70% of the work needs to be in one of the Indigenous languages, recognized official Indigenous languages, but you can combine it with other languages in as much as what you want. But don't try into something that's 70% Arabic, because Arabic is not recognized as an Indigenous language in South Africa. But you absolutely can include, we actually encourage people to use all the variations and things of languages, because we recognize that there's no one language gets spoken or expressed in the same way all throughout South Africa. So by all means, gooi.
Amy says that she's a first timer. Can she enter in more than one category?
Absolutely. There's several student categories. You'll see there are ways, just go have a look at the rules, but you'll see that there's either you can enter something in print or radio or TV or mixed media. And then there's the categories where you can enter things like campaign. So where you had a print execution, a social media execution, and a radio execution, for instance, together. So there really is, we've tried to open it up as wide as possible, because advertising is not what it used to be. People don't make only TV ads these days. Sometimes you make something that's only meant for social media. Sometimes people develop things which is like a WhatsApp campaign. So all of those things can be entered. If you've got any questions, rather mail us and just ask us the question, and we can help you with your specific answer on that. But Pendoring is for all forms of content, including publishing and children's books and the likes.
Carla says, thank you very much for our time. She just has a quick question. When we send work in, would you prefer if we have an English translated version as well for judging ease?
That's a requirement, Carla. You have to give us an English translation with your work. Otherwise, it will be disqualified. Or if we're feeling nice, we will ask you to submit that English translation. But all work in Pendoring must be submitted with an English translation. Any other questions? Cool. Maybe just to highlight for you guys, well, if you think of any other questions, this year is the beginning of the UNESCO Decade of Indigenous Languages. So it's not only in South Africa that we recognize the importance of Indigenous language. In fact, the United Nations have deemed it so important because Indigenous knowledge systems are going missing. We're forgetting how to heal ourselves using Indigenous remedies and things like that. And so over the next decade, we're really going to be working hard, not only with our friends in advertising and the communications industry, but with all different levels of government, etc. So this is a very good time to hone your Indigenous language creative skills so that you can follow a career in this field. When I started studying, my grandmother didn't believe that one can make a career out of what I do. So prove them wrong and start honing your creative skills using your Indigenous language. It really will set you apart in the world in the next decade. I think that's us. That's it from us. As I said, there is, you can put questions to us. There is an email address, hello@pendoring.co.za. And let us know how you found the session on socials using #LetYourLanguageLoose. Danke, Siyabonga, Nkosi, Rialibocha. Have a wonderful day further and have a good weekend. Thank you, everybody.
Thanks,
Keep
everyone.
well. Bye-bye.
Cheers.